reform the political system. It is that we need to follow that train of thought through to its logical conclusion that, if politicians are liars, then you need to get rid of politicians. Just like if you were in an abusive relationship, if your boyfriend or your husband or your girlfriend or your wife or anyone that you're with, if they're physically, emotionally or sexually abusive towards you, you don't need to change them as a person. You just need to get the hell out of that relationship.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, there's of course, there's always the possibility that, maybe this depends on whether these elections are actually as free and open as we think they are, but there's always the possibility that someone is going to be elected to a position of power who has all the right motivations and the right ideas and does great things for however long they're in power. But then they're going to get voted out, and maybe someone else comes in after them who's great and doing the right things. But the potential for the wrong person to get in is always there. And it's not even just it might happen, a potential. The system of selecting for people to lead a group like that, I feel, is almost geared towards finding people who are a little bit crazy, for lack of a better term, a little bit lack of empathetic, to feel that you are smart enough that you can just make decisions for large groups of people based on, your opinions and your beliefs and convictions. It takes a certain kind of person to feel like you can do that. And I feel those people are often not the kind of people you would actually want in those positions. You'd want somebody who is a little more careful and considerate about what they think, who isn't always sure that they're right, and who isn't always the most charismatic talker. The process we have for selecting these people in and of itself usually selects the people to be the kinds of people that we get in politics.
This alludes to a sort of topic that is, even amongst the Zeitgeist movement, is quite a heated debate. I myself, I'm firmly on the fence on this issue. Some people say that we need either some form of political reform, that we need some form of social conscience in politics, and that to be an active ingredient in the politicians' motivations. And that will at least make way for some kind of social change, some sort of, dare I say, socialization of the political system. So that will possibly even pave the way a little bit for, say, for example, a resource-based economic model. While I see validity in that sort of thing, I do see a lot of holes in it. And there's the other side where people say, well, politics is just completely bunk because there's vested interest to the hill. Even if you have the most socially conscious, ethical and good-natured politician, the very act of going into that political office or even political campaign, they're beholden to those vested interests, and they may not even in of themselves become corrupted, but their motivations will become corrupted because of, the monetary system and all the other things that are required to keep the system as it is. So, I myself, I'm firmly on the fence on that subject as to whether we need, like, say, for example, quote unquote, a zeitgeist party to throw our hat in the arena, so to speak, or to whether, just completely do away with politics. Where would you say you stand on that issue?
Well, I'm open to all avenues. I think a lot of good could be done by getting someone in office who thinks the same way that we do, who thinks, okay, let's design systems that are going to feed all the people, money's no object. Let's see what resources we have and what we can do with these resources to get the needs to the people. I think a lot of good could be done that way. I think I can imagine scenarios wherein that could even lead into a transition to a resource-based economy, lead into an actual free society being formed. But I don't think it's likely that it would happen that way. I don't think, for kind of the same reasons that I was just talking about before, I think by the way it works, the political system selects for people who aren't going to do that. And I feel like just the very idea of having leaders elected is in and of itself just a faulty notion for how to run a society. Having hierarchy is socially stressful to the people on the bottom of the hierarchy. Robert Sapolsky talks about this a bit in Moving Forward, and it affects people's health. It affects their mental health to an insane degree. The stress that's created from being inferior to others is one of the major causes, I feel, of a lot of the problems. Going back to Stefan Molyneux and his stuff about child abuse being the major cause of violence. Another one of those is the stress of being ruled over, of being in this system of hierarchy, of feeling powerless. And that's one of the major things that I feel would really change and really allow for lasting change in a resource-based economic model, is that anyone can participate in any decision-making that they want to. It's completely open to anyone. If you want to help design any sort of system, you just have to learn how to work with the materials. It's open source. If you know what you're doing, then you're part of the team if you want to be. There's no elections. There's no choosing this person to be the one who's going to make all the arbitrary decisions based on what they feel is best. There's a process of selecting based on what actually works. And if you can produce things that work, then you're part of the process of producing whatever it is you're interested in. Transportation systems, food systems, even like educational systems, just anything that you can imagine in society that needs to be done doesn't have to be relegated to control by a hierarchy of leaders. And whether the leaders are elected or they got it because they were the son of the king, or they were appointed by the king, or they were appointed by a president who was elected, it's all, there's varying degrees of how wrong and how problematic it is. Obviously, I prefer a system where people get to vote on who their leaders are, but in the end, it amounts to a very similar thing. You vote someone in, and then for 4 years, they're your dictator. You have to listen to what they say. You have to go along with pretty much with no recourse unless they, I don't know, get a blowjob in the White House. Then maybe they can be removed from power. But pretty much other than that, they're in there for 4 years and you're stuck with them. So there's not a lot of choice. There's not a lot of ability to participate, as much as they want to call it a participatory democracy. Casting a vote between, a couple different names every few years isn't what I would call real participation. It's not what I think of when I think of a collaborative society, or a society where your voice actually matters. So I do think the system of politics is bunk, and it's definitely not what we want to move towards. It could be useful as a transitional step to, I would be so happy to see the Green Party leader in America get elected in this election by some crazy fluke landslide. Neither Obama or Romney win, and I can't remember the candidate's name, but I saw they were having the debate. I watched one of the 3 debates that Romney and Obama did, and they streamed it on Democracy Now!, but they intercut it with the third-party candidates. And it was Rocky Anderson is from some party. I can't remember what his party was. And then there was a woman who was the Green Party candidate, and both of them were saying things that I totally agreed with. And I know they're still politicians and they're pandering to a certain demographic of people that I'm a lot closer to than those being pandered to by Romney or Obama. But to see those people in office, I feel, would be a huge change and a huge step in the right direction. If one of those third-party candidates, like the Green Party candidate, did get elected, it would be a huge change, a good step in the right direction for America to have someone like that deciding on policy. I think there's no denying, and there's no saying that would be just as bad as Obama in there. So I think there is work that could be done within the political structure that would put us on a better path, but I don't think it's a real solution to anything, and I don't think it's anything to strive for as an end goal to just get the right person elected. But I'm not against it totally, having some participation in that system.
Yeah. Having said that, you're probably more or less the same persuasion as me, like more or less kind of on the fence with the whole thing. There could be some validity in it, but we're not holding our breath for the efficacy of it, you know.
Yeah. If there's a landslide, you know, just toss up and somehow one of those third party candidates win, I'll be not just happy, but I would be very, very surprised, because I honestly just don't think it's possible. And I mean, I think there's pretty good reason. I think most people would agree with me that it's not possible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, because it's such a complex issue, and there's so many different things interwoven into that, you know, we can chat till the cows come home about, you know, the different elements of it. And I think that's what makes it such a contentious issue, even with people who are even, you know, steadfast advocates of a resource-based economy. It's one of the biggest questions that we receive, is that, you know, how do we get from here to there? That's the biggest question that we receive, the most frequent question. How do we transition?
Yeah.
You know? And that's one thing that, you know, I mean, even some people have gone as far as to say that the movement says nothing whatsoever about how to get from here to there. But the thing is, there's a lot of stuff that the movement has put out about how to transition. I mean, even Oscar Gonzalez, he's done nearly an hour-long pitch about how we can transition into a resource-based economic model. There's even a whole entire radio show that Peter Joseph has done. Granted, you know, the vast majority of it is about a fantasy scenario, and only a tiny bit about how he thinks it will actually happen. But then again, that's alluded to also in his Collapse radio show. But I think as the movement, we need to concentrate more on this transitional material. And that's one of the reasons why I created my transitional thinking presentation, is to provide the first steps with thinking about our values and what sort of things we have created in our culture, and, you know, at least trying to make some comedic points about it. But I'd say the first step is, you know, realizing that change within yourself. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the mistake is that a lot of people feel like there should be an exact plan. Like, okay, here's steps 1 through 10, you know, 1's this society that we have now, and when we get to step 10, we're going to be in a resource-based economy, and here's exactly how it's going to play out. But obviously the real world doesn't work like that. It's a far more dynamic situation we find ourselves in than anything you can just sort of lay out piece by piece. And like you said, anytime you try and do something like that, it'll be like Peter's fantasy scenario. It's, okay, well, if this happened, and if this happened, and if this happened, then we could do this, and then we'd be in a resource-based economy. But there's nothing you can say, like, definitely this is how we could transition, and it would work. Like, nobody knows that. Nobody could know that. So it's useful to just have different ideas, to put forth different takes on it, different strategies for transitioning as possible, different ideas, and not a singular transition plan. Yeah. But, yeah, we do get that question, like you said, a lot. Like, since moving to Vancouver, I've spent most of my Saturdays down at the Vancouver Art Gallery downtown. There's this kind of wide open space where there's a lot of activism goes on. There's a lot of, anytime there's a protest, it happens there. And we set up our booth every Saturday just right beside the art gallery. We just stand there and hand out DVDs and talk to people. Anytime someone comes up who understands what we're advocating, the biggest issue they have is, how are we going to transition? How are we going to get there? Yeah. And I think the answer we most often give is, well, it starts with you. You have to change your values. You have to realize in your own life, however you can, these ideas, and you have to present them to people. You have to try your best to act in accordance with them. Even though it's difficult in the current society, but there are things you can do. There are steps you